After my half-sister fell into the water, her demeanor transformed dramatically. A poem she casually penned gained renown throughout the capital, extolling the notion of equality among all, devoid of distinctions of rank or wealth. Even my betrothed, the crown prince, found himself captivated, kneeling before the emperor to pledge his intention to annul our engagement. She regarded me with disdain, declaring, "Ancients are merely ancients, their thoughts antiquated and their ignorance profound." Yet little did she know, I too am a traveler of time, having traversed into this world from the womb. At the spring banquet, I accompanied my half-sister, Xiao Ruijia, to the gathering. Her timid nature kept her hidden behind me, but in her excessive retreat, she inadvertently fell into the lake. To preserve her reputation, I leapt into the water to rescue her. However, to my astonishment, once Xiao Ruijia was brought back to shore, she transformed entirely, accusing me of pushing her into the water. She cried and lamented before the crowd, exclaiming, "Sister, I know not how I have offended you, that you would wish to bring about my demise." Soaked to the bone, her complexion pale, she shivered in the spring breeze, clutching her collar like a frightened creature. "I am aware you have never held affection for me, yet I am still your sister. While it is one thing to deprive me of food and chastise me, why would you push me into the water? Can you truly despise me so?" Her tearful pleas left the other ladies exchanging bewildered glances, their expressions akin to those witnessing folly. Even the dimmest of minds, it seemed, could recognize the absurdity of her claims. She appeared confused, unable to comprehend why the crowd's reaction deviated from her expectations. Meanwhile, I maintained my composure and offered a courteous bow, attributing her behavior to her fright. "Ladies, please forgive my sister. She has been startled and is bound to act irrationally." Upon our return to the Xiao residence, my mother was taken aback by the news. She gazed at Xiao Ruijia as if she were an oddity, stating, "Do you realize that your words at the banquet have insulted the Prime Minister's household? As the daughter of the Chancellor, your fortunes are intertwined with ours. To publicly accuse Qingli of mistreating you will not elicit sympathy. It will only reflect poorly on the daughters of the Xiao family. Have you completely disregarded the etiquette I have instilled in you?" Observing Xiao Ruijia's indifference, my mother confined her to her chamber, intending to summon monks and priests for consultation. When I arrived, I found her berating the maids of the Xiao household. "Who are you to restrain me? This is unlawful imprisonment, do you not understand? A bunch of sycophants, lacking any dignity." After exhausting her anger, she took up a teacup and, upon noticing my presence at the door, exclaimed, "Xiao Qingli, what brings you here?" I sighed, reminding her that the maids were merely following orders and that she ought not to make their lives difficult. Furthermore, her conduct today was wholly inappropriate. If not for your own sake, consider the other sisters of the Xiao household. As women, their paths are already fraught with difficulties, and you should not add to their burdens. I offered my counsel, yet Xiao Ruijia dismissed it with disdain. She cast me a scornful glance and retorted, "Elder sister, you are indeed the legitimate daughter of the Chancellor's household, forever prattling on about family honor. Do you not find it laughable that one places such weight on familial prestige?" Her fervor was almost exhausting to witness. She spoke with such righteousness, as though she were not a daughter of the Chancellor's family. Indeed, the ancients were bound by their ignorance, their thoughts antiquated and backward. She muttered the last part under her breath. Yet I caught her words and could not suppress a bitter smile. It seemed I had played my role too convincingly, even fooling a fellow townsman. The surrounding maids stood frozen, bewildered by the unfolding drama. Suppressing my tumultuous emotions, I replied coolly, "Your outburst today will echo throughout the capital by tomorrow, and your reputation will be irrevocably tarnished." Xiao Ruijia scoffed, and what of it? I chose not to engage further and turned to leave the room. She believed her modernity placed her above others, unaware that the wisdom of the ancients was not to be underestimated. Not long after, Xiao Ruijia sought to persuade her biological mother to uphold the principle of monogamy, creating unrest in the household. Upon learning of this, my father erupted in fury, administering a severe punishment that left her battered, only relenting when she admitted her wrongdoing. Meanwhile, her mother was sent away to a remote countryside villa under the pretense of ill health. Observing Xiao Ruijia, frail and weakened, I was reminded of my own experiences upon arriving in this world. I had traversed through time, initially filled with panic, but gradually adapted under my mother's affection. Yet, as I matured, the malice of the era began to encroach upon me. I was compelled to master the arts of music, chess, literature, and the skills of a woman, to embody the grace expected of noble ladies. However, I yearned for the freedom to express myself, to sit as I pleased, and to explore the scenic landscapes at the border, to wander through the bustling night markets of ancient times. Yet, for the first time, my typically gentle mother imposed punishment upon me, confining me to my chamber and forbidding me from stepping outside. She insisted that the eldest daughter must conduct herself with propriety, adhering to the rules of decorum. My father also expressed that a daughter must follow the 3 obediences and abide by the 4 virtues and should not roam freely. However, when a servant accidentally knocked over an inkwell, my father, known as a refined and scholarly chancellor, ordered severe punishment, nearly leading to the servant's death. The mother, usually praised for her gentleness and kindness, callously executed a maid favored by my father. Numerous such incidents opened my eyes to the grim realities of this predatory era, far more terrifying than I had imagined. I attempted to alter their perceptions, but my efforts were met with recurrent failures. At the age of 9, I was betrothed to the crown prince, becoming the prospective crown princess. From that point onward, all my endeavors seemed futile. As the future crown princess, I was obliged to speak and act with utmost caution, ensuring that my every word and deed aligned with the grandeur and dignity of the royal household. I finally recognized that the entrenched ideologies of this era were not easily uprooted by individual will. Gradually, I began to accept the identity of the legitimate daughter of the Shao family, striving to embody the behavior befitting the status. For it was only through power and standing that one could hope to attain the freedom of expression. In Shao Rujia's eyes, I perceived a sense of condescension. Had I been the newly arrived version of myself, I might have understood her perspective, albeit not accepted it. Alas, the current me could not entertain such thoughts. Soon, word of the spring banquet incident spread throughout the capital. People spoke of how the third miss of the chancellor's household audaciously accused her legitimate sister of causing her to fall into the water, publicly claiming mistreatment by the chancellor, an utter breach of decorum. In the evening, my father summoned me, indicating he wished to discuss the matter. After preparing myself, I proceeded to study. He was engaged in writing a letter, and upon my entrance, he set down his pen. Your third sister is still young and naive. As the elder sister, it is your duty to keep an eye on her. I acknowledged, I understand, father. Tomorrow, I will invite some ladies to admire the flowers and request their assistance in quelling these unfounded rumors. My father nodded in approval. You are indeed sensible. Qingli, your mother and I have high hopes for you. Do you comprehend? I understand, father. As for your third sister's situation, I entrust it to you. I have full confidence in your abilities. However, remember that you are the legitimate daughter of the chancellor's household and the future crown princess. Your status differs from others, and your actions must be deliberate and measured, not reckless. I grasped my father's intent. He feared that I might be influenced by Shao Rujia and act out of line. Do not worry, father. I will exercise prudence. 3. After recovering, Shao Rujia ceased her proclamations of monogamous ideals within the household and instead began to frequently attend various gatherings, producing a plethora of poems in diverse styles. She eagerly awaited the admiration of others, but instead faced skepticism. How could the scenery of the frontier possibly be penned by the third miss, who has never set foot there? And the spring night rain, there has been no rain lately. How can she compose such deeply sentimental verses before even being betrothed? Truly shameless. Confused, Shao Rujia wondered why the reactions deviated from the expected praise typically seen in novels. Her father, upon learning of this, promptly dispatched someone to retrieve her, arranging a marriage for her, forbidding her from leaving until the wedding. Naturally, Shao Rujia resisted, but was met with 3 days of deprivation, forcing her to feign compliance. Yet, unexpectedly, she remained obstinate, continuing her antics. She intentionally appeared before the crown prince adorned in eccentric attire, and indeed, he was captivated by her, leading to a swift and passionate exchange between them. I was engrossed in my reading when I overheard this gossip from my close maid, Yulan. While she expressed her indignation, I found myself accepting the situation with equanimity. My marriage is not a matter of my own volition. I harbor no affection for the crown prince, nor do I anticipate receiving his love. As long as I remain the legitimate daughter of the prime minister, the title of crown princess is destined to be mine, regardless of any changes in the crown prince. It is unfortunate that Xiao Ruijia fails to grasp this truth. The reputation that the Xiao family has meticulously cultivated over the years has been entirely tarnished by her actions. My mother dispatched people to retrieve her, only to discover that she was teaching a renowned courtesan some peculiar dance steps. Xiao Ruijia was brought before the family, kneeling in disgrace, yet she boasted, "What of courtesans? Are we not all equal? Why do you look down upon them? Occupations do not define one's worth." Such rhetoric may sound noble, but in this hierarchical society, her intentions in teaching the courtesan were flawed from the outset. As she sought to learn the art of seducing men, rendering her proclamations somewhat hollow. My father, infuriated, threatened to discipline her, but this time she stood undaunted, declaring that the crown prince had pledged to make me his consort. "Do you dare to assault the future crown princess?" I observed her, thinking that Xiao Ruijia had learned a measure of cunning, recognizing the weight of power, yet she remained woefully naive. After all, the gap between the crown prince and the emperor was vast, and he held no sway over my father. Indeed, the very next moment, Xiao Ruijia was met with a severe beating. "Father, mother, why do you always disapprove of me?" she lamented, glaring at them from the ground. "Is it because I do not conform like my sister? You should abandon such hopes." My father retorted, slamming his hand on the table. "The crown prince's legitimate consort cannot be a woman of your disrepute. Then what kind of woman is worthy of that title? My sister?" Xiao Ruijia protested. "No matter who it is, it cannot possibly be you," my father declared. "Please do not be angry, father," I interjected, stepping forward to pour him a cup of tea. "Third sister is just momentarily misguided. She will come to understand." After a sip of tea, my father sighed, "Alas. It is your mother and I who are at fault for raising such a daughter. Had I known this would come to pass, she should have been drowned at birth." "Father, please do not say such things. She is merely young. She will mature with time. Leave her be." My father waved his sleeve dismissively. "Let her reflect on her actions in her room." Xiao Ruijia was confined, and her misdeeds became the talk of the town. People whispered that the third daughter of the prime minister had gone mad, committing outrageous acts. My mother, perplexed, lamented, "This child seemed so well behaved before. How did she suddenly change?" "Do not worry, mother. The master has already performed a ritual. She is likely just momentarily confused." "Qingli, you have truly suffered," my mother said, taking my hand with a sigh. "Thanks to your father's foresight, a marriage proposal has already been arranged for her. Otherwise, who would dare to marry her now?" "Do not blame father. His high position means he has little choice in many matters." I understood all too well. Being born into a family of officials, one's marriage is seldom a personal choice. Moreover, as the legitimate daughter of the prime minister, my marriage is destined to be a political sacrificial pawn. "As for you and the crown prince," my mother paused, "he is a kind-hearted man and will surely treat you well. Besides, it is customary for men to have multiple wives. As long as you are the principal wife, the other women are of little consequence. Do not let it trouble you." "Mother, I comprehend." I was well aware that while she sought to comfort me, her true concern was that I might cause trouble. After a few days of confinement, my mother went to persuade Xiao Ruijia. "Third daughter, since you are already betrothed to the legitimate son of Lord Liu, you must be mindful of your reputation. He is gentle and well provided for. It is a respectable match." Xiao Ruijia, ungrateful, glared at us. "Get out. You all wish me ill. You cannot stand to see the crown prince favor me, nor can you bear the thought of my happiness." She pointed at me, her face contorted with rage. "If he is so wonderful, why not marry Xiao Qingli instead?" "I will not accept an arranged marriage. Whoever wishes to marry may do so. I refuse. If you force me, I shall perish in the Liu household and see if the crown prince will spare you." My father, seeing Xiao Ruijia's obstinacy, said coldly, "If you insist on this path, do not blame your father for being ruthless." That very night, he arranged for her to be sent out of the capital, only to have the crown prince intercept her en route. Upon learning this, my father was furious, but too proud to plead for her back, treating her as if she were no longer his daughter. Nevertheless, the crown prince knelt before the emperor, declaring his intention to withdraw from the engagement to support Xiao Rujia. This marriage had already been publicly announced, making it impossible for him to have his way. The crown prince remained in this position for 2 days, ultimately being knocked unconscious by the emperor's fury. Yet he was undeterred, turning to the empress for assistance. The empress simply stated, the legitimate daughter of the prime minister, Xiao, possesses both beauty and talent. She is fit to be the crown princess. The crown prince's disturbances in the palace led to a warning from the empress. If you do not wish to marry her, then do not remain as crown prince. Though his ambitions were modest, he did not wish to lose his current status and ultimately ceased his resistance. Preparations for the marriage commenced in earnest. On the day of the grand wedding, Xiao Rujia, hidden away by the crown prince, made her appearance, tearfully declaring, "Your Highness, I am with child." The crown prince's heart leapt with joy, but as he glanced at the emperor's grim expression, he shuddered involuntarily. After all, given her status, if she were to bear a child without clarity regarding its origins, what would become of the royal family's reputation? The emperor snorted, "Seize her and remove her." Xiao Rujia, in disbelief, opened her mouth to protest, but was silenced by a guard's hand over her mouth, helplessly being dragged away. The crown prince hurriedly stepped forward, clasping his hands together. "Father, no matter what, she carries my flesh and blood. Would it not be better to wait until the child is born?" The emperor's expression darkened further, and the crown prince's voice dwindled. "How did I raise such a spineless son?" The emperor rose from his chair, pointing an accusatory finger at the crown prince. If the crown prince had decisively acknowledged his faults and proposed to keep the royal bloodline, it might have been acceptable. But his indecision and tendency to act according to others' opinions rendered him utterly useless. The court officials averted their gazes, silent as the grave, unwilling to witness this royal scandal, wishing only to vanish into the ground. I realized it was time for me to make my entrance, after all. It was only I who could provide a dignified exit for everyone present. With a soft sigh, I stepped forward and knelt gracefully. "Your Majesty, since my third sister is so deeply infatuated and His Highness holds genuine affection for her, might we grant her clemency and allow her to enter the palace?" The emperor's gaze softened at my words, and he nodded slightly. "Since the crown princess is willing to intercede for you, I shall make an exception." The crown prince's eyes brightened, and Xiao Rujia exhaled in relief. However, my next words fell upon them like a bucket of cold water. "However, given that my sister has acted out of line, and considering there are still younger sisters awaiting a proper marriage, I kindly ask your Majesty to remove her from our family, severing all ties with the Xiao family henceforth." Xiao Rujia's face drained of color as she stared at me in disbelief, while I averted my gaze, merely bowing respectfully. The emperor, feeling a twinge of guilt, naturally acquiesced to such a harmless request. In the end, Xiao Rujia entered the crown prince's residence, but not as a beloved consort. She was merely an attendant, the lowest-ranking concubine. After the wedding feast, Xiao Rujia seized a moment to meet me in secret. "Xiao Qingli, you truly are magnanimous," she scoffed, her eyes narrowing. "Aren't you afraid that I might win the crown prince's heart?" I smiled faintly. "That would require you to possess such capability. Do not underestimate others." Xiao Rujia glared at me in exasperation, declaring that I should be the protagonist, for she and the crown prince were destined to be together. I remained composed, unfazed by her provocation, and retorted, "Xiao Rujia, is this truly what you desire? You have long aspired for a monogamous life. Why then have you so readily accepted the role of a concubine? Just wait, one day I shall become the principal wife." Xiao Rujia, flustered and enraged, spat a harsh remark before turning on her heel and departing. On the night of our wedding, the crown prince exhibited an unmistakable impatience, his movements coarse and devoid of any desire for dialogue. I was acutely aware of his disdain for someone as rigid and decorous as myself. Before dawn had even graced the horizon, he took his leave. Silently, I tidied my disheveled form, relieved that the wedding candles had extinguished halfway, sparing me the embarrassment of seeing his face. Otherwise, I would have had to feign a bashful demeanor, a task I found exceedingly arduous. As droplets of water fell upon my hand, sending a shiver across my face, I was reminded once more of my modern parents. Had they been present, they surely would not have subjected me to such torment. Alas, it was futile to dwell on it, the more I pondered, the heavier my heart became. Prior to the consummation, I had taken a secret elixir bestowed by my mother, ensuring the birth of a royal heir. This was not my desire. But I found myself without alternatives, particularly if I were to realize my ambitions. On the day of my return to my family home, Xiao Rujia accompanied us to the Xiao residence. I struggled to comprehend her reasoning, despite her evident disdain for the Xiao household. Why return at all? She was halted by the servants stationed at the entrance, unable to gain entry. With tears welling in her eyes, she looked to the crown prince, attempting to sway him with her sorrow. Yet he was powerless, for this was the residence of this young family, not the imperial palace. He was a prince, not an emperor. Xiao Qingli, is this your intent? You wish to humiliate me, do you not? Xiao Rujia glared at me. I remained silent. Not from a lack of desire to respond, but rather from an inability to articulate my thoughts. It was evident now that her mental faculties were in disarray. Xiao Rujia, you are no longer a member of the Xiao family. What purpose does your return serve? My mother, arriving to greet us, furrowed her brow at the sight, remarking that when she made her earlier choices, she should have anticipated the consequences. Xiao Rujia fell silent, casting a helpless glance at the crown prince. Although he was angered, he could not defy the emperor's decree and could only lead Xiao Rujia away. I watched her retreating figure, shaking my head slightly. Despite her proclamations of equality, she willingly chose to debase herself, lacking even a proper wedding and acquiescing to the role of a concubine. I was unaware of her identity before her transmigration, but I understood all too well the plight that a lowly concubine without familial backing would face in the confines of a traditional household. From that day forth, the crown prince ceased to appear before me. However, I remained indifferent. His neglect of household affairs had resulted in discord among the servants, creating a breeding ground for trouble. Once I took charge, I began restoring order among the unruly attendants and assembled a new cadre of managers. I even managed to win over a young servant close to the crown prince, from whom I learned that he spent his days in the company of Xiao Rujia. Yet, I paid it no mind. As long as power resided with me, they could frolic as they pleased. The crown prince's infatuation with Xiao Rujia blinded him to the repercussions of his actions, particularly the disgrace it brought upon the family of the already betrothed Lu Shirling. This led to the crown prince facing hostility in the court, where he was subjected to ridicule daily. And the most disheartening aspect was that not a single official rallied to his support. After failing to accomplish several tasks, he finally thought of me. Qingli, could you possibly speak to the chancellor on my behalf? The crown prince appeared somewhat sheepish. I carefully considered my words, Your Highness. It is not that I am unwilling to assist you, but my father is equally powerless. The crown prince frowned. How can that be? The chancellor is a veteran of 3 reigns. Surely he can handle a mere Lu Shirling? Your Highness, I replied softly. Lu Shirling is backed by the Duke of the State, and my father and the Duke have differing political views, as you well know. Of course. This was merely a facade of disagreement. Both were cunning foxes who understood how to act as subordinate players. The emperor would undoubtedly prefer to see 2 capable ministers at odds. The crown prince fell silent. As the legitimate firstborn son, he had been designated as the crown prince due to the emperor's dwindling heirs, yet he was woefully ignorant of the intricacies of governance. He remained unaware of the enmity between the Duke of the State and the Chancellor, nor did he grasp that the emperor was not oblivious to the crown prince's predicament. Despite his shortcomings, he was still the crown prince, and Lu Shirlong's audacity to undermine him was only possible because the emperor had tacitly permitted it. Lu Shirling was merely a pawn used by those in power to test the young prince. I feigned ignorance, watching the crown prince flounder in his distress. However, what none anticipated was the crown prince's solution to his troubles, taking concubines. A procession of noble ladies was ushered into the estate one after another. While this did not afford him comfort in the court, it at least provided him with a semblance of respite. The emperor's countenance grew increasingly grim, his disappointment palpable. Yet the crown prince remained oblivious, reveling in what he believed to be a brilliant strategy. As the number of women increased, so too did the potential for discord, particularly in a feudal society devoid of entertainment. Though the crown prince's harem expanded, he spent the majority of his time at Xiao Rujia's side. The consorts, naturally, were displeased. They recognized whom the crown prince cherished and were acutely aware that Xiao Rujia lacked familial support, prompting them to conspire against her. These women were either of noble birth or possessed exceptional beauty and talent, and more importantly, they were well-versed in the subtleties of palace intrigue. Xiao Rujia found herself besieged, subjected to relentless scorn, and nearly met with a tragic end. When I learned of her plight, I could not help but find it amusing. Did she not understand that the intrigues of a traditional household were far more perilous than the rivalries of a modern workplace? How could she be so audacious? I had anticipated that these hardships would temper Xiao Rujia's ambition, yet to my astonishment, in her desperation to solidify her standing in the crown prince's heart, she heartlessly caused the demise of her own unborn child and framed a favored consort for the act. The latter was subsequently neglected and confined to her quarters, while Xiao Rujia garnered even more affection from the crown prince as a result. Yet, her possessiveness grew increasingly pronounced. She attempted to impose modern notions of monogamy upon the crown prince, which only invited his disdain and contempt. As the crown prince, destined to be emperor, why should I limit myself to a single spouse? I once thought you a rare source of amusement. How naive of you. Xiao Rujia fell from grace. The crown prince began to frequent the quarters of other consorts with increasing regularity. As the strife within the inner palace escalated, I discovered that I was over 2 months pregnant. The entire courtyard buzzed with excitement. The Empress Dowager herself came to visit, eagerly anticipating her first great-grandson. The crown prince showered me with lavish gifts, perhaps drawn by the tranquility I provided, for he began to visit me with greater frequency. However, I found his presence rather vexing. Each time he arrived, I felt compelled to don a facade of tenderness and consideration, a torment in itself. I decided to have Yulan secretly spread the word in Xiao Rujia's quarters that the crown prince and I shared a deep bond, potentially leading to the dismissal of the concubines in the rear palace. As anticipated, Xiao Rujia, unable to contain herself, adorned herself in lavish attire and appeared at my door, ensnaring the crown prince in her allure once more. I was granted a brief respite. Upon hearing the news of Xiao Rujia being elevated to the position of favored concubine, I experienced a sudden, intense pain in my abdomen. My water had broken. Amidst the gasps of the maids and matrons, I successfully delivered the first legitimate grandson of the great Xia dynasty, named Yunyu by the emperor himself, and he was even granted the title of Prince of Yong immediately upon birth. Yunyu was extraordinarily intelligent, and by the age of 4, he had already surpassed his peers in academic progress. The emperor praised him profusely, even desiring to instruct him personally. In my recollection, throughout history, instances of sons surpassing their fathers have been quite common. A useless child is hardly a surprise. Should one not consider a change? Behold, though the crown prince is inept, he is indeed of use to me. The ministers, sensing the subtle shift, hastened to congratulate my father, each vying for favor, while only the crown prince remained oblivious, lost in the allure of women. Shortly after Yunyu entered the palace, it was my birthday. The crown prince, with a grand flourish, declared a lavish celebration, inviting not only officials and their wives, but also promising to spend the day by my side. However, after a few rounds of wine, a maid burst in, announcing that Xiao Rujia was suffering from abdominal pain, likely a remnant of a miscarriage, and was in declining health. At this, the crown prince immediately rose and strode out. I gazed at the empty main seat and smiled. The next day, Xiao Rujia came to me, brimming with pride. Sister, look. No matter what I have done, His Highness always returns to my side. I regarded her in silence. You must be very envious of me now, Xiao Rujia chuckled. You merely rely on your status to become the crown princess, while I possess true love. My expression remained calm. Xiao Rujia, you have now learned to be jealous, adopting the underhanded tactics you once scorned. Do you still remember where you came from? Do you recall the principles of propriety, integrity, and honor you once studied? You! Xiao Rujia exclaimed in frustration. You always act as if you're above everyone else, as if no one can compare to you. If you had simply relinquished the position of crown princess, would I have ended up like this? I shook my head. You had the chance to choose. You could have been the legitimate wife, living a peaceful life, or, at the very least, retired to a tranquil estate. Yet, you chose to become a concubine, embroiled in the intrigues of the inner palace. Do you understand what you have done? Yesterday, before everyone, you embarrassed me, thinking you had won. But when word spreads of the crown prince's inconsistency and his favoritism towards concubines over wives, do you really believe this will be advantageous for you and the crown prince? Xiao Rujia evidently did not comprehend. So what? He is the crown prince, destined to be the emperor. Do you think anyone would dare speak ill of him? Xiao Rujia. You overestimate yourself, I sighed. You truly understand nothing. This is my final counsel to you. Since you enjoy the crown prince's favor, know when to retreat. A tree that stands out in the forest will inevitably be felled by the wind. You must grasp this truth and learn to conceal your talents. Perhaps the outcome will not be so dire. How eloquently you speak, Xiao Rujia sneered. Do not think I am unaware of your thoughts. Are you not simply afraid I will overshadow you? I ceased to respond, realizing she had absorbed not a single word. Speaking to her was akin to playing music to a cow. I longed for all the comforts of the modern world. Xiao Rujia's arrival felt like a lifeline, prompting me to repeatedly remind and assist her, unwilling to confront her. Heaven knows, the moment I discovered she was a time traveler, I yearned to embrace her and share the pain and repression I had endured for years. Yet, upon realizing she considered herself a destined child, I dismissed that thought. I no longer hesitated. The warmth in my eyes faded, replaced by a polite smile. Sister, thank you for the birthday gift you sent. I too shall bestow upon you a grand present. At the mention of a birthday gift, a modern term, Xiao Rujia looked at me with uncertainty. However, she had no time to ponder, as she was preoccupied with countering my moves. I arranged for several women akin to Xiao Rujia to enter the estate, some matching her personality, others her appearance, all skilled in the art of scheming. The crown prince indeed took notice and gradually began to neglect Xiao Rujia. Panic set in for her. The methods that had captivated the crown prince were merely novel tricks learned from modern advancements. Now that other women possessed similar skills, even more beautiful than she, naturally, she could not compete. Xiao Rujia employed every tactic she could muster, yet nothing could sway the crown prince's heart, even drawing his irritation. Desperate, she resorted to pretense, claiming to have received guidance from celestial beings, possessing knowledge of things unknown in this world. She proposed numerous agricultural improvements, which the crown prince presented to the emperor, earning immediate accolades. The crown prince, elated, elevated her to the status of a secondary consort. Xiao Rujia then suggested several methods to increase grain production and even strategies for warfare. I recognized her references to renowned modern military texts, though none here were aware. The soldiers of the day, while having their own strategies, welcomed the insights with great admiration. Thus, the crown prince shone brilliantly in court, and Xiao Rujia basked in increasing favor. She frequently visited my quarters, boasting of her newfound status, threatening me to willingly relinquish my position as crown princess. Xiao Qingli. Do you see? The crown prince still cares for me. With just a word, I can obtain so much. Xiao Rujia, standing on the shoulders of giants, reveled in her perceived triumph, as if all this knowledge belonged to her. You seem completely unfazed. Do you also know of these things? At times, she would fixate on me, suddenly uttering such a remark. Each time, I would respond nonchalantly, until I succeeded in driving her away. Yulan, fuming, exclaimed, Your Highness, Xiao Consort is truly overstepping her bounds. I shook my head with a smile, gently soothing her not to be anxious. I understood that Xiao Rujia's reservoir of knowledge must be limited. Eventually, it would run dry. When that day came, her position would be precarious. In this era of imperial supremacy, when others discover your uniqueness, they will not rush to flatter you. Rather, they will weigh the benefits, first determining if you can be of use, and if they perceive any disadvantage, they will seek to suppress and isolate you, even eliminate you. As I traced my fingers over the book in my hands, I sighed once more for the impending conclusion awaiting Xiao Rujia. Her time here had been too brief, her exposure too limited, allowing her to speak freely without fear, yet this posed a significant risk. I had offered my counsel, she could not blame me. The crown prince's performance in court grew increasingly remarkable, proposing many visionary strategies that earned him the respect of the ministers. The emperor, who had initially focused on educating Yunyu, began to take notice of the crown prince, unable to hide his admiration. The Xiao household seemed to regain its tranquility, no longer inundated with invitations and overtures. During a day of rest, I met with Yunyu, refraining from mentioning these troubling matters. Instead, sharing amusing anecdotes to subtly influence his thoughts. The emperor would instruct on the art of ruling, and the grand tutor would teach the 3 cardinal guides and 5 constant virtues, yet I too had my own aspirations. I wished for him to learn to respect others and understand the struggles of women. Indeed, it was not long before complications arose for Xiao Rujia. She had exhausted all she could say and could no longer offer new ideas. During a court discussion, the emperor, seized by curiosity, inquired about the crown prince's thoughts. However, the crown prince stammered, even presenting an utterly absurd notion. The emperor, displeased and suspicious, ordered an investigation into the crown prince. This inquiry soon led to revelations about Xiao Rujia. The poems she had composed and the words she had spoken were laid bare. Her proclamations of equality in a monogamous union seemed mild, but the underlying notion that noble birth was irrelevant was deemed treasonous, clearly inciting rebellion among the populace. The emperor was furious. What an audacious Xiao Rujia! What a charlatan claiming divine guidance! Are we to expect her next move to be a rebellion against the heavens? The ministers in the court knelt in fear, each drenched in cold sweat, desperately pondering whether their own children had interacted with this woman. Zhao's father, in a frenzy, prostrated himself, exclaiming, "Your Majesty, this woman spreads her wicked words and disrupts the court. She must be executed to cleanse the realm. I implore your Majesty to punish her." The emperor regarded him, his expression inscrutable. After a considerable pause, the decree was issued. The crown prince has demonstrated a lack of virtue. His temperament is frivolous and unfit for high office. He shall be placed under house arrest for 6 months to observe any changes. As for this enchantress, she is to be thrown into the dungeons, awaiting execution by dismemberment come autumn, as a warning to others. The Prime Minister, Xiao, trembled at the proclamation and bowed in gratitude. Once imprisoned, Xiao Rujia wept daily, her face perpetually stained with tears. She could not comprehend how, merely moments ago, she had basked in the glory of being the crown prince's favored consort, only to find herself condemned to death the very next instant. This reality starkly contrasted with the tales of time travel she had perused. In her cell, she lamented incessantly, claiming her innocence. The jailer, wearied by her cries, seized an opportunity when no one was around to reprimand her. "You assert your innocence, yet what of the poems you've penned? How can a woman confined to her home compose such a diverse array of verses? You speak of divine guidance, but the emperor, the sovereign of this realm, has not even laid eyes upon such beings. How dare you presume to overstep? These are all charges of treason, punishable by death. That the crown prince has escaped unscathed is already a mercy from the emperor. You would do well to accept your fate and suffer less before your end." The jailer mused to himself, thinking it preferable to allow him some peace. Xiao Rujia found herself plunged into despair, experiencing for the first time the shackles of this imperial age. One day, as I indulged in a brief respite, Yulan came to inform me that Xiao Rujia was weeping and imploring to see me. After some contemplation, I resolved to visit the dungeon. Through the bars, I beheld Xiao Rujia. In just a few days, she had lost her former radiance, her spirit diminished, her visage soiled. Upon seeing me, her eyes sparkled with hope. Sister, please save me. I know you too have traversed time. Only you can rescue me." I replied coolly, "It is too late. Do you not understand why the emperor seeks your life? You are a potential threat. Your knowledge of modern concepts and your unconventional thoughts pose a danger to those in power. The emperor cannot allow someone like you to exist. The moment you introduced those modern ideas, your death was sealed." Xiao Rujia's countenance shifted dramatically. "How can this be?" I retorted, "How could it not? You have failed to grasp your identity in the modern world versus here. In the modern era, laws are binding. Here, the laws serve only the powerful. You wish to win the crown prince's affection while simultaneously earning the emperor's favor. Such fortune is not granted to the greedy." Her face turned ashen as she protested. "No, since I was chosen to traverse time, I must be the protagonist. How could I meet such a tragic end? On what grounds do you presume yourself the protagonist?" I countered. Xiao Rujia faltered, momentarily speechless. "What? You cannot answer? I have never understood your audacity in believing you are destined for greatness. We are both time travelers. Why do you consider yourself superior?" I initially thought your confusion was temporary, and I endeavored to awaken you to reality. Yet you stubbornly insist that simply being transported through time entitles you to everything, that you should be revered. But Xiao Rujia, have you considered if you lack brilliance? If there is no guiding system, what are you? You are nothing. You claim to be the protagonist, yet what have you done to earn such a title? Nothing. In the end, you even forgot who you truly are, losing yourself entirely in the intrigues of the inner court. A woman of the new era. Yet you willingly succumb to becoming a concubine, reliant on others this life. Is it truly what you desire? Xiao Rujia stared at me, tears streaming down her face. This was the last time I beheld her. Shortly thereafter, I received news that Xiao Rujia had somehow deceived the crown prince into meeting her in secret, resulting in his assassination at her hands. She, too, took her own life. It was said that in her final moments, she cried out, "It's all your fault. You deceived me into believing we would be together for eternity. Since you cannot fulfill this, then accompany me in death. I do not wish to be dismembered. I long to return home, to my mother and father." Upon hearing this, I sighed deeply. My last connection to the modern world had been irrevocably severed. Following the crown prince's death, the emperor was profoundly affected, falling gravely ill, after which he named Yunyu as his successor. 2 years later, Yunyu ascended the throne, and I served as the Empress Dowager, governing from behind the curtains. Having risen to a position of power, I finally had the opportunity to implement the measures I had once envisioned. Although the process was fraught with challenges, I persisted in my efforts to provide women with more choices, rather than confining them merely to the inner chambers of the palace. My life transformed from that of a powerless prime minister's daughter to a powerful Empress Dowager. I witnessed the tides of history and propelled societal advancement. Reflecting on the past feels like a distant memory, yet I harbor no regrets. Perhaps a millennium from now, this will also be recorded as a chapter in history. The end. Thank you for listening. We shall meet again in the next tale.